Hey A&Pers, this is Dr. Jones checking in. This is A&P II Lab 4 video 3, wherein we discuss the blood supply to the kidneys. So as you know, this is the aorta, that's diaphragm, so this would be thoracic aorta, and abdominal aorta. Going back up is the inferior vena cava. And we already know that the arteries going into the kidneys are renal arteries, and the veins coming out are renal veins. So switching to our kidney, we have the renal artery, and then when it splits, these are all segmental arteries. So segmental artery, segmental artery, segmental artery. And when then they go up the sides of the pyramids, they are interlobar arteries. And then when they arc across the top of the pyramid, those are arcuate arteries, arcuate arteries. And then you see how they radiate out into the cortex. Those are cortical radiate arteries. Cortical radiate arteries radiate out into the cortex. And then we're going to have to switch to the candy corn model. So we clearly can't see the renal or segmental arteries here, but we do pick up with our interlobar arteries. And then arcing across the top of the pyramid is the arcuate artery. And radiating out into the cortex, these trees here, the tree trunks, are the cortical radiate arteries. And now we've got, coming off of the cortical radiate arteries, I'm going to zoom in here. There we go. Perfect. So now we've got the afferent arterioles, and they come off of the cortical radiate arteries, and they lead to the fruits, which are the glomerulus in the renal corpuscle. And then out the other side will be the efferent arterioles. So cortical radiate artery, afferent arteriole in, glomerulus, efferent arteriole out. Afferent arteriole, glomerulus inside, efferent arteriole. Afferent, efferent. And we'll find the same thing on the other side with our other tree, cortical radiate artery. We've got an afferent, a glomerulus, an efferent. Afferent arteriole, and that's different than an artery, it's smaller, and then an efferent arteriole. Afferent arteriole, efferent arteriole. And we can also see those on the next model, where we have the, zoom out a little bit. One of these days I'll zoom out the first time instead of zooming in. So we've got the afferent arteriole. Remember, that's where we found the juxtaglomerular cells that, along with the macula densa on the distal convoluted tubule, make the juxtaglomerular complex. And then, of course, the glomerulus, and we said this layer that is the wall of the glomerulus is the glomerular endothelium, and we said it was covered by this layer, which is the glomerular or visceral epithelium. So there's the whole thing's the glomerulus, and then out is the efferent arteriole. And the fact that the efferent arteriole has a smaller diameter than the afferent arteriole is what jacks up the pressure in the glomerulus and forces fluid out through the filtration slit in between two podocytes into the capsular space. And the filtrate is what gets filtered and processed by the rest of the renal tubules to become urine. Okay, so that was the afferent arteriole, glomerulus, efferent arteriole. And now we have our capillary beds. So the capillary beds are going to be the very smallest vessels that connect the arteries to the veins. These are going to be exchange vessels. So where the red and the blue meet is going to be a capillary bed. So the paratubular capillaries are the capillary beds in the renal cortex. The paratubular capillaries are the capillary bed in the renal cortex. The vasorecta are the capillary beds in the renal pyramid, in the renal medulla. And then we have a cortical radiate vein, zooming out. Oh, I zoomed out the first time. Snap. So we had cortical radiate arteries, our red trees, and cortical radiate veins as blue trees. And of course, now that we're in the kidneys, we're entirely in the systemic circuit. So arteries are red and veins are blue. Arcing across the top of the pyramid is the arcuate vein. And down the side of the pyramid is the interlobar vein. So skipping back to our kidney model, we pick up, let me flip this here, with the cortical radiate veins, arcuate veins, and the interlobar veins. And even though these branches are here, we don't have segmental veins. Don't ask, I don't know. And then these are the renal veins. So now let's see what of that we can find on the weird 80s abstract model. There we go. Okay, so this one does not have the interlobar arteries or veins, but we do have arcing across the top of the pyramid an arcuate artery. And then the trees, the red trees, are the cortical radiate arteries. We've got afferent arterioles. We know the glomerulus is inside the renal corpuscle, and then the efferent arteriole coming out. Here is a capillary bed in the renal cortex, so we know that that's a, paratubular capillaries. And if we can scooch this thing, there we go. There's a capillary bed in the renal pyramid, so we know that's a vasa recta. And then we've got cortical radiate veins, some blue trees, and an arcuate vein. Okay, we're not at 10 minutes yet, so we will keep going. Let's do the urinary system model. So we've got kidneys, adrenal glands, the aorta, left and right common iliac. We've got left and right common iliac vein and the inferior vena cava. Of course, you can see the renal artery, renal vein. What else can we see in here? We've got segmental arteries in the renal sinuses. We've got interlobar arteries up the side of the pyramid, arcuate arteries arcing across the top. Let me zoom in. There we go, it's better light. Arcuate arteries arcing across the top. Cortical radiate arteries, cortical radiate veins, interlobar veins, and the renal vein. Okay, zooming out. And then we also have the ureters going down to the urinary bladder. And again, we do have the gallbladder, so this does need to be a urinary bladder. So the folds in the urinary bladder are called rugae, just like the folds inside the stomach were rugae. The detrusor muscle is the smooth muscle wall of the urinary bladder. That's what squeezes to squeeze your pee out. This triangle shape here is the trigone. The internal urethral sphincter is this part of the detrusor muscle of the wall, and it's right here. And the urethra is where the urine leaves the body. This model has a prostate, which makes this prostatic urethra. If they want, and there's 3 different parts of the urethra in the male, so if they want just the term urethra, they will ask it in a female model, not this one. If they ask in this one, they want prostatic urethra. All right, so that's page 30. Let me flip it so it's on the next page. Oh yeah, it's the sheep kidney dissection, which we are not going to do today. So that will end this model. That was the end of the urinary system that we are covering. So this was A&P II Lab 4 video 3. And when we come back, we will do a video on the male reproductive system. So the education must go on. Dr. J out.